All right, let's just dive right in and reverse engineer the fundamental operating system that drives wages, hiring, and really the core engine of our economy. Today's explainer is all about decoding the markets for the factors of production. We're going to pop the hood on the labor market, figure out exactly how your paycheck is determined, and see how the different moving parts of our entire economy actually connect. So to kick things off, we really need to ask the ultimate question. How does a profit-maximizing firm calculate the exact inputs it needs to succeed? It's pretty easy to assume that hiring is just a manager's gut feeling, But in a competitive market, it is a highly precise calculation. Firms aren't just guessing out there. They are running this kind of invisible algorithm to figure out exactly how many people they need to hire to maximize their profits. Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with the demand for labor, move to the value of marginal product, look at shifting the demand curve, explore the labor-supply trade-off, find labor market equilibrium, and finally, factor in land and capital. Part 1. The engine, the demand for labor. To really build out this system, we have to look at it purely from the perspective of the firm. See, a firm doesn't just want workers for the fun of having workers, right? Labor demand is what we call a derived demand. It's based entirely on the goods they produce. And the production function is essentially the core code of our firm. It translates human effort into tangible output. Think of it like a recipe. You put ingredients in, like labor, and hopefully you get a solid product out. It's that direct, measurable link between your workers and your final product. Let's use Caroline's apple orchard as an example. When Caroline hires her first few workers, apple production just shoots straight up. But as she crowds more and more pickers into that same orchard, they actually start bumping into each other. The production curve starts to flatten out. This is a crucial parameter known as diminishing marginal product. Basically, each new worker adds slightly less to the total crop than the worker who came right before them. Let's put some specific numbers to this. If adding a second worker increases apple production from 100 up to 180 bushels, the marginal product of that second worker is exactly 80 bushels. We're measuring the exact incremental benefit of that one specific hire. But here's the catch. 80 bushels of apples doesn't pay the bills directly. The firm has to figure out what those apples are actually worth in the marketplace. Which brings us to part 2, the data stream, value of the marginal product. So how do we convert physical output into the value of the marginal product? We literally just multiply those 80 extra apples by a $10 market price. That shows us the second worker produces $800 of new revenue. Now, if the market wage for an apple picker is $500, the math is incredibly clear. The firm pays out $500, gets $800 in value back, and pockets a $300 marginal profit. They are absolutely going to hire that worker. The firm's profit-maximizing algorithm will continuously hire workers right up to the exact intersection where the value of the marginal product strictly equals the market wage. That actually makes this curve the firm's true labor demand curve. If a worker brings in $600 of value and costs $500, boom, hired. But if the next worker only brings in $400 of value because of that diminishing marginal product we just talked about, but still costs $500 to hire, the firm stops hiring immediately. Moving on to part 3, reprogramming the model, shifting the demand curve. Okay, let's upgrade our model by throwing in some external shocks, because obviously the economy never sits perfectly still. Now, while labor-saving robots might shift demand left by replacing humans altogether, history actually shows us that most technological progress is labor augmenting. It makes workers more productive and shifts demand to the right. Think about it. A carpenter with a hammer is great, but a carpenter with a high-powered nail gun can build a house in half the time. That nail gun doesn't replace the carpenter. It makes their marginal product, and therefore their value to the firm, much, much higher. Get this, thanks to that exact kind of labor-augmenting technology, the hourly output of a typical U.S. worker absolutely skyrocketed by 195% between 1960 and 2015. And here is the truly amazing part about that. It simultaneously doubled overall employment, despite the fact that wages adjusted for inflation also rose dramatically. It turns out, when workers become more productive, firms want to hire way more of them, even at higher pay rates. Part 4. The human element, the labor-supply trade-off. Now, a market always has two sides. We've seen the Coles calculus of the firm, but now we really need to look at your deeply personal decision to supply labor. Firms demand labor, sure, but you, the individual, have to decide if you actually want to get off the couch and supply it. Every hour you spend working is an hour you can't spend watching TV or hanging out with friends. That means the cost of your leisure time is exactly the wage you're giving up. If you make $15 an hour, taking an hour off to play a video game effectively costs you $15. If you get a raise to $20 an hour, well, your leisure time just became a lot more expensive. Generally speaking, as wages go up, people choose to work more because the financial reward is higher. But what happens when you introduce a sudden, massive influx of wealth, like, say, winning the lottery? The whole algorithm flips. When this happens, it causes what's known as the income effect to dominate, so the worker chooses more leisure and less work. If you win $1 million, a raise from $15 to $20 an hour really doesn't matter to you anymore, right? You're wealthy enough that you prefer to just use that wealth to buy back your free time. And at a macro level, this explains a super fascinating anomaly: the backward bending labor supply curve. As technological advances raise wages across society, rather than working constantly, workers eventually use their prosperity to buy more leisure. It literally bends the supply curve backward over time. This is exactly why, as advanced economies grow richer, we don't end up working 100-hour weeks. We actually tend to work slightly fewer hours, taking our newfound prosperity in the form of more time with our families.
Part 5. The synthesis. Labor market equilibrium.
All right, it's time to merge our two separate models, the firm's demand engine and the worker's supply trade-off, into one unified economic equilibrium. When these supply and demand streams finally intersect, they lock into a state of perfect balance. Every single firm has maximized its profit, and every worker is paid exactly the value of their marginal contribution. The wage adjusts perfectly to balance the quantity of labor workers want to supply with the quantity of labor firms want to hire. Any shift in either curve instantly recalculates that new equilibrium wage. Finally, Part 6, expanding the ecosystem, markets for land and capital. Zooming out to look at the entire operating system of production, we have to realize that labor doesn't operate in a vacuum. Its demand is inextricably linked to available land and capital, meaning a change in the supply of any one factor alters the earnings of all the others. For example, if a hurricane destroys a region's capital, say the ladders and trucks at Carolyn's apple orchard, the workers suddenly have a lot less capital to work with. Their marginal product drops, their value drops, and consequently, their equilibrium wages drop, even though the workers themselves haven't changed one bit. So as we wrap up today's explainer, I want you to leave yourself with this crucial final calculation about your own future in this constantly shifting economic ecosystem. The market for the factors of production isn't just some abstract theory. It's the active code governing your career, your paycheck, and your free time. As new tools and technologies continue to arrive, your value in the market will depend entirely on how you augment your own marginal product. Keep that in mind.